Hello, my name is MaryAnn Rockwell. I'm a librarian at Saratoga Springs Public Library. And this is Poets Talk Poetry. On this webcast, I invite a poet to read two poems, one of their own and one favorite poem by a poet that they admire. Today, my guest is Bunkong Tuon. He is going to be reading Digging by Seamus Heaney and his own poem, which is Fishing for Trey Platoo. And did my best with that pronunciation. Bunkong, Dr. Tuon, is a Cambodian-American writer and critic and poet who teaches at Union College. He's the author of 3 books of poetry and a chapbook. His latest book is And So I Was Blessed, published by NYQ Press. Also by that press is the book Gruel. Bunkong's work has been widely published in such journals as Numéro Cinq, Paterson Literary Review, the Mekong Review, and the Massachusetts Review. Bunkong has been nominated for numerous Pushcart prizes and the Best of the Net prizes, and was awarded the 2019 Nasiona Nonfiction Poetry Prize. You can find him on Twitter at Bunkong Tuon. And now I will introduce Bunkong reading Digging by Seamus Heaney.
Great, thank you for having me here. And let me just, the poem here. When I first read this poem by Heaney, I thought that that's exactly what I have been doing, with my writing in terms of talking about family and history. Even though we don't have the same historical cultural backgrounds, I think there's a similarity here. Digging. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug. The shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Tona's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened out to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slab of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. That poem moves me every time I read it.
Wow. Tell me more about why it does move you.
It's a poem about inheritance, family, and cultural, and it's about generational differences. You have the poet, I assume is Heaney himself. He's looking out the window. He's a writer. He's a poet, and he he sees his father digging, and that reminds him of his father and grandfather working in the field. And it's the tone of respect and admiration for the older generation. And in my work, when I started out, I wanted to write poems and stories about my grandmother, my uncles and aunts, my grandfather, what they went through, in a tone of respect and admiration. They were farmers from Battambang, Cambodia, but we're different. I hate to say it, or I'm uncomfortable saying it, but I guess, I'm a writer, also a teacher, and I think we're different in that sense. When back in the 80s, late 80s, I barely made it out of high school, and I think they, at least one of my uncles wanted me to be an engineer, but I had no desire and maybe no intellectual ability to become one.
It sounds as if he wanted you to be a success in whatever, like a traditional success story in America.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I never got a chance to ask what their views were about writing and about poetry. I know that when I said something like that, they said, but your poems don't rhyme, and
I think we lost you here.
And there's no moral to that, but I'm really interested in personal history and documenting it.
Yes.
So
at
least starting out.
I think that's, I think what drives poets really is their own personal experience and sometimes their own personal traumas and things they're trying to work out from their childhood, and to me, so I just wanted to say that I find a lot of music in this poem and kind of a rough music, like he has a lot of consonants, like a clean rasping sound, the gravelly ground, I look down, potato drills. So it's almost underscores this difficult work, but he raises it up in that way too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I admire about his poetry. There's the commitment to people and to family and to history and culture and place, but then there's the musicality that you mentioned, and there's plenty of that in the poem, whether it's internal end rhymes or consonants or alliteration, and then the imagery. And I think one of my there are a lot of favorite moments in this poem. But I think one of it for me is the when the digging becomes a kind of metaphor for work and for writing. And this is a section where he's remembering his grandfather and carrying milk in a bottle to him, and the grandfather is nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. There's a kind of precision and editing and
there is, and
also
Well, I happen to have been in Ireland in the north of Ireland in Donegal. I was staying at a B&B for
Oh,
a
wow.
few weeks. And the
Okay.
guy who owned, the proprietor, went out and dug the peat for the fire every day. He was at the peat. And they were these neat little slices of almost like this green styrofoam. It was amazing. It was like there was an endless supply of it.
Wow.
So I just sort of felt that so much.
Yeah, it's the connection to the earth, to the soil, to a certain kind of labor that, I think a lot of us are foreign to it. And I think the digging for me is what he does as on a sort of on a metaphorical sense, in terms of excavating one's past and one's family history. And I think that's sort of what I did when I started writing, in terms of the history of the Khmer and being refugees, and losing connection to the motherland, to the culture, to the language. And I think my first book, Gruel, deals with ghosts and memories and absences, and trying to put down in words, the stories of my family. And he does this in here in this. This is his first book.
I just wanted to point out, Bunkong, that at the end he says the last few lines, "But I've no spade to follow men like them." And there's a regret and an almost embarrassment in that statement. It's like an admission, like, I couldn't do that. I'll do the easy way, which is writing, or not really so easy, but.
Yeah. My uncle, he owned a video store, and he worked 7 days a week from 9 o'clock to 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, from 9 in the morning to 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. 7 days a week.
So different than doing something on the land or eking your existence out of the land in a natural environment.
Yeah, but that's the work. That's work ethics. That's what I admire. The older generation is their commitment to work.
And we're going to hear about more about your culture in the poem that you read next, which is your poem. And I'll let you say the title this time, please.
Okay. Let me see here. Fishing for Trey Platoo. You might have seen them fishing on the shores of the Cape Cod Canal. My uncle in his fisherman's hat, pulling in a 1-foot scup. My aunt in her pajama-like pants walking backward up the bike path, snapping a line that's gotten stuck between the rocks. My other aunt reeling in a sea bass. Her husband by her side, directing. Bikers, jockers, teenagers and their dates, families with their children look curiously on. Or maybe you've seen them lining up all 3 sides of a pier in Salem, their wrists jerking in a language that bewitches the squids below. They're not the only ones. Other Cambodians and Vietnamese, one's enemies, fish side by side on the same American pier. Other immigrants, Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, speaking languages I can't understand, come together on this spot, sacred rods in hands, beckoning the squid. Or maybe you've seen them under a bridge fishing the Providence River, looking for Trey Platoo, a type of mackerel they used to eat in the refugee camp in Thailand. Sometimes my aunts and uncle run into an old friend from those long ago days. They talked about the lack of food
of sneaking out at night to fish, and of running, always running from the Thai police. They exchange phone numbers, share fishing secrets, set up a time and place where they'll fish together again. Once they get home, my aunts gut the fish, clean them, fry them, put them in a boiling stew of kalangkao, lemongrass, and kaffir leaves. My uncles and aunts sit in a circle on the floor, eat, and tell stories of how this fish got away, or how one of them got caught by the Thai police. No matter how hard they try, they can never understand why my cousins and I ever bother with fishing. Why we catch and release food as if it's some sport.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to note that a couple of things I admire about this poem, and that it starts out kind of through the lens, you invite in the lens of, I guess, the typical American. You might have seen them, and you repeat that phrase, I think, somewhere else in the poem, like, you might have seen them like these, kind of making them the familiar alien, or the regarding these people as alien somehow, if I may say that. But then it ends up it ends with this through the lens of these participants in the fishing culture, just thinking it's so ridiculous that you would catch and release food as if it's some sport, which of course in this country it is a sport, but how bizarre that seems to them. So that's alien to them. So it kind of switches.
That's a really, really good point. Really good close reading. Yeah, it's different from Heaney. I think Heaney is sort of more, in conversation and with the self about family. Whereas this one, I think I was trying to be a cultural translator, and I think you're right on in terms of switching the perspective and having, my uncles and aunts' perspective, looking at American way of fishing. Absolutely, and this, it's something that they always wondered about us. It's like, why bother with all that stuff? Why bother with the tackle and getting up in the morning? You're not bringing food to the house. Why waste time? So that perspective is drilled in my mind, because when we fish with family, other people who don't understand us would look at us, and I would feel very embarrassed and ashamed. My aunts in their certain clothes and certain hat,
the pajamas,
and the people jogging and young teenagers looking on, and I'm in my in my teens or so, and I'm really embarrassed about that. So it's just a lot of emotions and feelings and memories in this poem regarding identities.
But I see that correlation with Heaney's poem in some ways. There's this insular vocabulary, like there's a reverence for the earth and the things of the earth, the sacred rods in hand beckoning the fish, and then they're bewitching the fish. So there's a relationship with the fish and the ocean. And in Heaney's poem, there's a relationship with the dirt. It's like a sustenance. It's a place of sustenance, but there's also, I think in Heaney's poem too, it's with the guys, he's watching his grandfather's rump, like just doing this manual labor, that, and almost like, wow, I'm doing something so different now. And I might be a feeling of almost embarrassment in his poem too, or there's a disconnect that's similar between the poems. But then there's the dignity ascribed to these people in your poem as well, I think you really succeeded in doing that.
I'm
And-
being recorded on here.
What?
Take out.
Oh, there's
My
there's
daughter.
similar kind of music again, like Heaney's has these words that that might not be in the English vocabulary even, might be like local Irish dialect. It's what he does a lot. And you do that a little too, just with the mention of the ingredients of the food, for example.
Yeah. In terms of documenting this kind of life, you're also documenting the tools and the food and the sort of different culinary practices in terms of groups of people. It's I think the early work of for me here is really is about it's not just about my story, it's about my family and my people.
Mm-hmm.
And one way to sort of tell that is to be specific and concrete in terms of the tools that they use to
Absolutely. Yeah.
to live.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's beautiful. And I thank you for sharing poetry with us this afternoon. And
My pleasure.
yeah. And have
All right, great. Thank you.
the rest of your day. Okay. This is
thank you.
Talk Poetry, signing off.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.